You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin the Cleric.
And me, Paul Brophy.
Tonight we are talking about a topic and an issue that is never mentioned in the mainstream media here in Ireland, and that is women living with disabilities. And my phone is going off. Women living with disabilities. And we're about here on the Irish Political Roundup and Competent Women Ireland. We are going to really put the floodlights on this topic and the issues of especially women and children living with disabilities. We're not excluding men either, so we'll just put that there. So tonight I would like to introduce our panel guests. My first one who is on the top screen is Rita Murphy. Rita Murphy and I met many years ago on Twitter, on X, but we've many messages have been toing and froing from us and talking on Twitter, but we've never actually met. But tonight it's great that I've met Rita Murphy virtually at least. Rita Murphy is a real activist here in Ireland, especially with the mother and baby homes and with disabilities. Sabrina Devine is a women's rights activist and a disabilities activist, and is very vocal on Twitter as well. And Gladys O'Neill is also a women's rights activist, and she is also an activist for women living with disabilities. And you're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think what we'll start off with is maybe even introduce yourselves and the disabilities that you have. And I think that would be good for our listeners. So Brita, if we could start with you about, how did disability enter your life? I know that was something that Gladys, she was saying, somebody once said that disability arrived at my door, but how did you come to live with disabilities?
Acquired disability. I became disabled due to a car accident. About 7 years later, I was able to walk with aids. And maybe about 10 years later, I was able to walk without aids. And then another 20 years or so later, I was in another car accident. They say lightning never strikes twice, but it did in this case. And that one was pretty serious. So I was rendered disabled then, and being older, I think the fact that I had been disabled more or less in childhood or as a teenager, that gave me some courage to think that I could survive and that I could come through this. But of course, the injuries were pretty serious. And within a very short time frame, I realized that everybody viewed me differently. So that some years later, as soon as I could, and I was still then pretty disabled, I went to Berkeley in California, where the independent living movement started, because I wanted to understand how far they progressed and how we could progress here. And I'll speak about that later, because I was quite disappointed with what I found. And in fact, found that people were segregated. Those with disabilities lived in a community, and the only person without a disability that they saw every day, unless they left the compound area, was the postman, the only person. So I saw that as a real backward step. And I suppose that's my experience of disability. I don't focus on it but at times like this, when there is legislation and when there are changes to the Constitution that impact negatively on us, I feel it is a duty for people like me who have lived experience to speak for those who are newly disabled, or who as yet are non-disabled right now, but for whom will wake up one morning soon to find that their life is changed. They need to know that, and the government need to put in place various services from a human rights perspective, rather than have us fight continuously. No person in this earth is born to fight day in, day out. And to see yesterday the children and their mothers outside the All Éireann, I mean, to me, that really was crippling. It is so deeply distressing. And to know that the people within Dáil Éireann, those who hold power, did not think them worthy enough to come out and speak to them or to join them and assure them that they had their best intentions at heart. That to me is soul destroying. So yeah.
Yeah, Rita. And Sabina, can you just remind our listeners about how you acquired a disability?
So back in 2008, I had a road traffic accident. I was driving my motorbike and a woman turned in against me, and I was rolling around on the road, and eventually when I stopped, I see my leg in a mangled mess. So the bones actually came out through the skin, and had to be rushed into hospital. I spent 2 months in hospital, and 5 of those weeks I wasn't allowed to get out of bed. So talk about undignified, not even allowed to get out of bed, even go to the bathroom, for example, or even have a shower. Now don't get me wrong, the nurses were really nice and they helped me out a lot, and made sure that I was kept hygienically clean, but you still miss having an actual shower. But yeah, so then I was like in a wheelchair for about 13 weeks, and Dublin City is not wheelchair friendly at all. Getting on public transport is absolutely a nightmare, especially the Dart. You have a gap the size of a trench to get over the thing. And like when I was first using the Dart, I didn't realize you needed to I thought it was like the Lewis, you could just roll on. No, I didn't realize there was a gap. And when I first went to go and use the Dart, I didn't realize I needed to get a ramp. And so like it was like I had to get out of the wheelchair with my crutches and hop on. And lucky my mom was with me, so she was able to lift the wheelchair on, but she shouldn't have had to do that, And no one was there at the platform to say, oh, by the way, there's a ramp there that you can ask someone to use. But by the time you get the someone to get out the ramp, you'd miss the train. So like anyway, that's just one little kind of story about that. Also, people kind of walk on top of you. That was another thing I found when I was in a wheelchair, especially going up Grafton Street. Like people walked on top of me, and at the time, like my leg was like bandaged up because the skin grafts, and I was still getting weekly dressings on it, and I was changing the dressings at home myself, like so the skin was quite damaged, and I had to keep my leg out a little bit slightly, and people would just like almost fall on top of me. So I actually had to put out my crutches and just kind of like keep them out to stop people from falling on top of me and yell, disabled person in a wheelchair here, watch out. Like people were just so oblivious, and until something like that happens, you don't actually realize. And like I grew up I went to school where there was lots of kids in wheelchairs and stuff like that. So like I always knew how difficult it was, but until you actually experience it yourself, you have no idea, what it's like. And then I spent about 18 months doing physio, going off on walking sticks and crutches and things like that. And then for a while I didn't need to use the walking stick, but because I'm missing a lot of muscle and nerves on my leg, I had to go back on the walking stick again because I was walking around the city centre and I felt something pulling my leg. So I've been using a walking stick ever since then. But in the plus side of taking up swimming, so that kind of helps quite a lot. And I'm in the past 2 years I've taken up sea swimming. But there's still like lots of places, lots of beaches and that are not very accessible either, probably Sandy Sea Point and Sandy Cove, because there's a ramp. If you were in a wheelchair, you could get down into it. And in the summertime, some of the beaches now have like wheelchair access chairs, so they can put them into the water. But they're like very rare to find, so they're not available on all beaches, if you know what I mean. But yeah, so that's just a little synopsis. And then I also deal with fibromyalgia as well, so that's on top of everything else. So
And Rita and Sabine, when you have a disability and your disabilities are both acquired, you totally have to change how you look at things and how you go about about your daily business, I suppose. What would have been the kind of the biggest thing you had to adjust to very quickly? Like, I remember talking to somebody who had an acquired disability, and he said, when you look at a building, for example, you look at it completely different. Your first thought, well, can I get in this way, or can I get in that way, or is there stairs around? You know, all these
Mm.
things that us able-bodied people we totally take for granted. Like, but I suppose, what was the biggest kind of mindset shift that you had to perform?
For me, it was the attitude of people that I loved and loved me, and how they didn't see me. I'm talking about friends, not family. People that I would have met very regularly for lunch, who explained to me that they viewed me differently because the accident that happened on the same road they travel, and it could have happened to them, and they didn't think that they could cope. So looking at me reminded them of their vulnerability, and that floored me because it meant that they couldn't see me anymore. And the other thing, when you talk about the inaccessibility, I remember being with my sister and we were in a cafe, and I know this wouldn't happen today. And I am lower down, and the lady's behind the counter. So she's looking at my sister at the same height. So she said, "Does she take sugar?" And again, you feel invisible, or you feel like you're silenced, and only part person. And I did put on Twitter today that the late John Mulholland, who was a local politician here in Galway and from a very famous musical family, he explained, I remember him on Galway Bay FM talking, that he lived in Salt Hill, and it's a scenic area, it's the beach and everything, but he never realized how inaccessible, and he was on the local council, how inaccessible the footpaths were for both people with disabilities and mothers with buggies, until his brother Billy became disabled and was on a wheelchair, and John was pushed, and he realized. So I think there is that learning curve, and I admired him for his honesty, because many times people don't admit to that being the catalyst for them to actually become involved. And I think many of our politicians, and one of the days, I'm sorry for going on, but one of the days that one of the things that annoys me is the International Day of People with Disabilities, when the Taoiseach will have for him with him for a period of time, but the person with the disability with them is not a person who gets to see the documentary evidence and the way people with disabilities are dealt with. So you cannot critically examine. I mean, I've done my degree in political science and my postgrad in public advocacy and activism. So I would be the ideal candidate to sit with Leo Varadkar, Micheál Martin, or whoever's in the Taoiseach seat, and look at the papers just as he does, and critically examine what the government are doing versus what they could do for a person with a disability, rather than tokenistically having us there almost nodding to us, you know. I think it's doing a disservice to us.
Yeah.
And Gladys, can you explain to our audience and describe how you acquired your disability?
Yeah, like the other two ladies, I acquired my disability roughly 11 and a half years ago, or whatever. Feels like yesterday, still, because it's a new reality. I think I can absolutely, it brings me back, Rita, what you're saying, because people, just one woman, she's actually moved, she was a neighbour. Every time she saw me, she cried. It's really, really upsetting, to have somebody that I was, and people stopped treating me like the way they used to treat me. And again, about vulnerability, I think they kind of, I was a reminder of what can happen to you. I have an autoimmune disease that attacked my spinal cord, and I use a rollator. I was at one stage in a wheelchair, and I found that really distressing. That was really distressing, because you're not level, with anything. people are looking down at you. That is such, and with pity. And that pity, that, you know, God lover, you know, pity, that, oh my God, I hated every minute of it, you know, that idea. And it was an awful shock to the system. Plus, you're not well, you know, you're dealing with not being well and trying to find some sort of, like, even the doctor didn't even get it right, you know, I'm going to get you better, Gladys. You're going to, you know, you're going to walk again. And all of that, you know, I believed her. Why wouldn't you, you know? But it didn't happen. The nerves were damaged to beyond repair. So it left me, I see myself as lucky in comparison to others. I use a rollator because I have no balance. I can only walk a little bit now because I've got older and I've got another disorder, or 3 or 4 of them now. The autoimmune seems to come about in threes, you know, and so it's affected my lungs and all of that kind of carry on. But life has been tough. I think I'm a tough old bird, but you know, but I live in an inaccessible world, and I live in a world that has treated me with charity, not independent. You know, I'm a charity case, you know, and everything that you deal with and whatever, and even being out today, people are kind, you know, some people are, you know, kind and decent and whatever, but you're never considered, you know, unless it's a sort of a gang of people that have disabilities, you know, we're in one of those organizations, you know, where it's catered for. But if you're out and about on your own, everything, you know, I was trying to, wait now, hold on, what am I trying to say? I have an obsession about bathrooms, absolute obsession. Because when I became disabled initially, I had no clue how anything worked. You know, could I get in? You know, does my rollator get into a bathroom? No, it doesn't. And I've no balance, so oh my God, disasters. You know, sort of thing all over the place. And then I didn't want to go out because, you know, and then, you know, my family getting really annoyed with me because I'd be ringing up places and asking them, do they have an accessible bathroom? And they'd say yes. And off I'd go to find high chairs, mops, buckets, you name it, not being able to get in. And this was really stress inducing to find, you know, so everything came then about a bathroom, you know, so your world becomes very small, very quickly, isolated, extremely isolated, and you could be left there. So you have to fight back, you know, in yourself. And I think becoming an activist because I could see all the things that are wrong. I worked in the health service. I worked with disabilities. I thought I had some sort of idea. But now I can see it from both angles, from both sides. And really, I suppose you can get weary and worn out banging the drum, you know, of asking for change and bringing about change. And quite simply, it can be done so easily, you know, like a social model, you know, a universal design of everything designed universally. These aren't big, major asks, you know, and it can be done, but they're not interested. And I don't understand why that possibly is. And then I try to be kind because I think people are wandering around the place and they're not really thinking it'll ever be me. You know, like I went around thinking it'll never be me, but it was me. And so it's it can be extremely challenging.
And Gladys, you said you had an autoimmune disease which caused your um, disability. So you could say to a certain extent, your disability, it's a combination of both visible and invisible. There are many people out there whose disabilities are not as visible. I'm sure you'd share their kind of frustrations that, you know,
absolutely,
it's
100%.
much harder for people to kind of grasp something like that, because I have a friend of mine, he's an intellectual disability, and you looked at him, you wouldn't think he had a disability, but he 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 has an intellectual disability. So first, when you have the invisible disability, that can be and also a challenge.
Yeah, well, an autoimmune disease, it can affect you. I misfortunate, or had the misfortune for attacking my spinal cord, but other areas that could, I have many, well, not many, but a couple of friends that have autoimmune disease that you'd never know by looking at them. But their life, it surrounds bathrooms, for instance. We would have the same common thing about, always being very near a bathroom. Having to be near a bathroom because of the autoimmune disease and whatever, or tiredness or pain and all of that doesn't show up, sort of thing in people, that you'd know, as you say, with your friend, that you wouldn't know, that the invisible disorders as well, the invisible disabilities. Yeah.
Yeah.
What infuriates me with the toilets is places lock the toilets. Like,
Yeah.
I remember when I was doing I was doing a university access course, and we went into a dating in Trinity, and what was really there was a girl there who was in a wheelchair and she needed to use the bathroom. It literally took us 15 to 20 minutes to try and find someone to open that bathroom. Like, and I was just like, honestly, like, why are you locking the toilets? Like like you don't lock the ladies' toilets or the men's toilets. So why are you locking? Oh, we're trying to stop other people from using it. And I go, what, like disabled people?
Yeah. But
I
unfortunately, I sorry to interrupt, Jack, but I just recount a story that happened to me. I found it really amusing in a very weird way. Do you remember when they issued those cards, the universal cards that everybody had to have, the identity cards, or can't remember the name, social welfare cards, or can't think of the name of them now. But you had yeah, and it was meant to be so that for every services that you would be using, you'd have this card, And so the first place that they asked me to go to wasn't accessible. So I had to go into town or get into town, and it was a really miserable day. And they had a ramp and they were jigging it or doing something with it. And it was like a skating ring. And went out for it to be held, sort of thing, like by the builders, going up and whatever. And when I got in, the lady was very nice, taking all the details and you name it. And I said to her, now this is early on when I was first diagnosed and first became disabled. And I said to her, where's the bathroom? And she said, oh, unfortunately, we have to, lock it down and shut it, because antisocial behavior was going on. People were using it to inject themselves and do all sorts. And I thought, oh my God, where am I? Oh, gee, what am I going to do? I panicked. And she said, would it be okay if you came, back into the office? And I thought, oh my God, this is great that, they'll have a bathroom I could use. But in fact, they didn't. And it was the first instant of utter humiliation, in my life, where a total strange woman had to hold on to me because I've no balance. I couldn't get my rollator into the bathroom. And a total stranger had to support me. And I cried for 3 weeks afterwards. I didn't want to go out. I could actually cry now. It is really upsetting. She couldn't have been kinder. I probably would have been exactly the same myself, saying, look at, this is okay. What human being should go through that? To have a stranger hold you while you need to use the bathroom. And this was a government, they were insisting that you went in and filled out these forms or interviewed and got your picture taken and you name it. And I'll just never forget that. That was a shock. It set me back months, and honestly, I'm still obsessed about bathrooms, everybody jokes with me. It's okay, Gladys. We found there is a bathroom. We did check, there is a bathroom you can get into. But I think the amount of things that have happened to me in the 11 years of humiliation is unforgivable, unnecessary. absolutely unnecessary, you know. Very sorry, I interrupted there, but really, it brings back, you know, horrible memories.
Mm.
Hospital appointments are quite difficult as well, because what I've heard from you, Sabina and Gladys, before, was that, you know, an awful lot of especially the X-ray equipment and machinery are not really disability accessible. And, you know, even going for a mammogram, the mammogram is not designed for anyone with a disability. Rita, have you ever experienced anything like that?
I think what I've experienced more so is I wanted, I suppose, being on the wheelchair, secondly, the second time around, I kept wanting to have my independence. So, and this is true for every person with an acquired disability, you remember what life was like. So, and regardless of how long it's been, you're trying to get back there. So, I'd gone to an appointment in Marlin Park Hospital, and the waiting room was particularly full. So, we were in the corridor, and they called my name. And in order for me to get through on the wheelchair, and I was fairly good at negotiating, I saw my way through getting, and this man said he'd open the door for me, and I said, no, I'm okay. Look, you know, I'm fine, I can do it, because it meant pushing the door with my foot, and I didn't realize that there was something behind the door and I would not be able to push. So I had to turn around and say, can I have your help after all? And we both laughed, but it shows how the little things. Now, you know, there are times when I've been upset. We did go into, myself and my sister went in again. It's about toilets, and it was in where Debenhams in and Roach's stores were in Galway City at the time. And I went into the toilet, and while I was sat on the toilet, we flushed the toilet. We didn't realize that the flush came back up.
Nice.
So I didn't change of clothes, so my sister had to nip out and get me a change of clothes in that in Debenhams. So like that can happen, but you know, it's a learning curve, and I do think it's better today than it would have been years ago for that. There are places that are more accessible, but at the same time we learn, we adjust, and we shouldn't have to adjust. That's the problem. We shouldn't have to. It should be universally accessible for everybody without us having to ask somebody for help, because you always feel a burden, and you shouldn't burden placed on you, because that's placing the disability within you rather than within the structures that challenge you.
Absolutely. And I'll throw this out to the floor, and whoever wants to answer it, they can. We have a department for disability. I think it's an absolutely monstrous name. It's Department of Children, Disability, Equality, Integration, and Youth, or something like that. There's a lot going on there. Roger O'Gorman is the minister. Do you think having a dedicated Department of Disability is a good thing, or is it just completely overloaded?
Well, can I just answer that? Because I've written to him 150 times. He's never replied, for a start, not even an acknowledgement. And Anne Rabbitte is the junior minister for disabilities.
Yeah.
And, you know, you get the generic reply, you know, sort of, you name it. There was a minister solely for disabilities who thought he was Superman. I can't think of his name now at the minute. He retired there.
Vinnie McGrath.
Yeah. The very man. And you know, all of the spiel and the talk and whatever, I can only talk personally. Nothing has changed in supports to make my life more livable, with having a minister dedicated to disabilities and having Roderick O'Gorman with a list of whatever he's attached to, and Anne Rabbitte, who seems to be a very nice person, but nothing has changed. And I would say, just to, you know, I do believe it was said to me 11 years ago, and I dismissed it and thought it was untrue, that any monies that are available for disability go to the young. The older person with a disability is literally left out of the picture completely. And I would have to say that I owe her an apology, because that's exactly what it is. There is nothing for the older woman with a disability in any kind of few crumbs that they throw, you know. And it has actually got worse, in my view. In the 11 years, has actually got worse. So no, I don't think, you know, there's a lot of lovely names, you know, inclusion, equality, and they love inclusion, but they don't stick in isolation in there, you know, inaccessibility. So that'd be more honest if they did, you know. So
The
that's
word inclusion, like, it's lost all meaning now.
yeah,
They're using it for everything. And to me, it's like it's lost all meaning, you know. Like I just find it infuriating. That word inclusion, because it doesn't mean it anymore. They're only including a certain amount of people and they're leaving out the rest of us, you know, and it's really frustrating.
really,
If they had to be like Tom Cloonan as the
Mm.
things would be far better, because he's had the experience of watching his son. And I mean, it's pretty heartbreaking when he was a social worker who said basically, when he said, "Who will look after my son when I'm gone?" Very genuine concern that that parents of people with disabilities have, and you know, they were quite dismissive. As he has a daughter, and so it would fall naturally to her to care for her brother without, you know, any thought for what her life may be like, or what her aspirations are for travel. I mean, and equally for Tom's son to feel that burden has been placed on another family member. And I do think all of this could be resolved, not even by a dedicated Minister for Disability, but by the ratification of the optional protocol, which would allow us to access our rights outside of Ireland. Right now, we can't. And you can't get them within the jurisdiction. And the word strive is absolutely a kick in the teeth for any person or any family with a disability, because you can strive, it can be an aspiration, but what we want it to be is a reality, that we can reach our potential, that people with disabilities generally, a child not yet born, or one who is just 1 year old, that they can now get the cost of disability for them for life. All of that should be able to be examined and dictated, and the full potential of that child with all of the necessary supports put in place. But nothing is accessible. And to me, the appointment of Anne Rabbitte was merely, again, tokenistic. Roderick O'Gorman many times had the opportunity, and particularly when there was a changeover, to lose some of the demands on his time, and to excuse me, to lose portfolios such as integration or whatever. And he chose not to. Someone has to. Why would you take on so many portfolios and do all of them badly? Because he's also the minister for people who have been in the institutions that I regularly speak of. And I'm reminded more of, as we speak tonight, the fact that we are all living independently. The three of us who are speaking, we are living in our communities. But for people with disabilities who are institutionalized, it is an absolute nightmare. They have nobody for them. Many of them have no family to speak for them. And so they're wholly reliant on a service that, if you look at the HICWA reports, you know, they are completely disheartening. And there's no place.
But I find that that you brought that up, but I find that in the organization, the disability organizations who have the charity model will put forward the inverted commas their success story, and that child, boy or girl, or young person, look how successful they're going to college. They might have a PA or some sort of serious supports around them, but you will never see the ones that are behind them that have no supports, that I know for a fact, because I saw it with my own eyes, that end up in day centres with older people with dementia, with all sorts of other disability, totally age inappropriate, and no futures. You never, ever hear of it, read about it, unless you're involved with it or you see it or you have an interest. And that is absolutely scandalous. So to the average person walking around the place, they think, well, oh, I saw Joe, Joe's in a wheelchair and Joe's going to college and Joe's supported and, sure, isn't it great? Disabilities are, they're doing great stuff for disabilities, but what they don't realize is there's one, and the way they divide up, a personal assistant, only it's like a lottery. Who gets it and who doesn't get it, and so instead of everybody being allowed to live independently with the PAs and the supports that they need, only selective people get this. I don't know how they break it down. I don't know what they do, or I don't know how it works, sort of thing, because it's been, not been able to secure it myself. So it's a very ad hoc, there's no holistic looking at disabilities. And to the person, what they need, that person, as an individual, their life, So it's one size fits all, and you all get to try to get into that box, and off you go, close the door and leave you, Unless you have women like us who will fight back and say, you know what, we're not letting you away with this, So they don't want to talk to us, They don't want.
Yeah. Also, I found when I was first after I finished all of my rehab and I started walking around. I remember one of the girls I went to school with. We were best friends all through school, but now we're not friends anymore. But she always tried to treat me with kid gloves and going, oh, I don't know if she'd be able to. And I go, I'm standing right here. Like
Yeah.
her and her partner were having an argument whether I could, because we were up on her land, and I have these two hiking poles that I bring with me because I like to try and walk around as much as possible, and they were like, oh, I don't think she'd be able to. She can't do this. She can't do that. And and that was another thing. God, my parents were great when I first came out of hospital, but my dad would be talking to people, and I hear him saying, oh, she can't do this. She can't do that. And I was determined to try and give it a go because I wanted to be a paramedic before I had my accident. And so I applied for this course in Shakur, and I gave it my all, and I got past the course with flying colors, but in the end I had to think of reality. Well, I can't get down on my knees like I used to go and do CPR, and and being a paramedic is a physical job, but I wanted to try and prove these people wrong, but they were like, well, we told you so. And I'm like, but I still completed the course and I still got distinctions in my course. So I was really proud of my achievements, and that was actually what got me into going into university, those results. So, it's so debilitating that people are they go, oh, but they don't ask you what can you do, and that's why I took up swimming, and actually speaking about swimming, actually, there's a woman who also had an accident. She used to be a triathlon. She used to take part in triathlons, and she's in the UK. Her name is Sophie Etheridge. I'll put up a link of her Instagram, but she's such an inspiration, and because she actually lives in a wheelchair all the time, and she Now she can walk a couple of steps with the aid of crutches and things like that. But she swam the channel last year. It took her 29 hours just using her arms, but she swam it from the start to finish, from the UK to France.
Wow.
And, you know, like people always think of disability, but they never think of ability, you know, and
100%.
that's the other thing, you know, like my Instagram page is basically my swimming stories. Like I help raise money for Wicklow Animal Welfare with all my open water swims that I took part in last year and stuff. The longest swim I did was the River Moy swim, which was 2.5K. I did that in 52 minutes. So with the help of the river flowing now, in all fairness, but I still did it. But the best swim I did this year was actually Glendalough. And the people there were really helpful when you got a disability. They had my walking stick ready for me when I was getting out of the water and things like that, you know. But yeah, I always have to email, like if I'm trying to take part in any event like that, I always have to email them. I got to tell them my disability, and is there anyone there to assist me getting out of the water? Especially Killiney Beach can be quite dodgy actually to get in and out of, so I always like have someone helping me get in and out of the water because of the undertow currents. Actually, I've been knocked off my feet a few times. But you have to like analyze the dangers and that. But like I always think of my abilities and not my disability, if that makes any sense. Sorry for waffling on about sea swimming and stuff, but
that's really important, because what I'm thinking of, even though anyone is living with a disability, movement must be very important, and exercise for a daily routine to keep your body in some sort of mobility and your health as well. Rita, you're nodding your head in agreement there.
Swimming is the most important thing. And, you know, talking about that just reminds me of the thesis I did in 2004 called People with Disabilities, Their Perception of Society. So I interviewed a cohort of people who are disabled, some from birth and some with an acquired disability like myself. And so all of us, we don't see ourselves differently. We see ourselves as people with rights, with ideals, with dreams of all sorts, you know, having a full-time job, being married, having children, having everything that everybody else can have. And so we are the ones who see ourselves as full human beings. It's the policymakers who restrict us. It's the challenges that are in the community, and that trickles down to society, because they look to what policies are in place, and if it's about employment or if it's about accessibility in shops or accessibility in nightclubs, they will look to what legislation is there that is holding to account the owners of those establishments. So in a way, it all comes down from Leo Varadkar or Micheál Martin or whoever are the cabinet ministers who sit around a table and decide, well, why don't we have people with disabilities who are vocal, who have lived experience for maybe 6 years or 1 year or 20 years, come to us with various accounts as to how their life has changed? Because my life from 10 years ago, and I was disabled then, is different to now, because Gladys explained that with age comes and your body is under stress. And like Gladys, I have autoimmune conditions that I've developed simply because of the stress that is on my body. And that is another hurdle to overcome, because the medication that I need, I've also had a heart attack, and when I have a flare up and I can't walk, and I often end up in hospital because I cannot have the medication that I could have previously because it affects my heart. So there are knock-on effects, and we are adjusting all the time, but the government need to listen to people who have lived experience, and to listen to us saying, vote no to this amendment. That's the most important thing. I do not see that we've progressed sufficiently. I do not see that, and I take on board what Tom Cloonan, what Catherine Connolly has said, and I think we have to err on the side of caution. And no, absolutely, I've told everyone that, you know, we cannot have a society that regards us as second-class citizens, as going under a charitable model of disability.
Well,
And
I'm
could I just
definitely
add,
voting
sorry,
no.
Roshan, could I just add there something that is just after occurring to me? You know, as an activist, and I think I said that, you know, by activism, in my view, helps me, you know, sort of thing, not to woe me, you know, how sad, you know, sort of thing, like crying in the corner, you know, sort of thing. The idea of trying to help somebody else or not for somebody else to suffer as much makes it a little bit easier for myself to live. But I tried an experiment, and it's really, oh my God, I'm like a dog with a bone now at this stage. And I won't mention the name of the place, but I was asked to volunteer. So it's to do with disability housing, and for young people coming up, you know, a universal design. And they, you know, so they wanted a steering group of people with lived experience of disability to have an input. So I said I would volunteer, and this other guy with me would volunteer. But I said, you know what? We won't do it without, now I probably mispronounced this. I'm always doing this, you know, a stipend or stipend, a small
Stipend.
stipend. Yeah, is it?
Yes.
Stipend.
That's another problem with disability, you know, sort of thing. My teeth were rotted because of the medication. And then because I was ventilated, they knocked out my teeth trying to get the bloody tube down into my lungs. So I say all the words all wrong. So right, thank you very much, Sabina. And so I said, I'm not doing it without this. And this is an inclusion, and they have flags hanging everywhere, included, and you name it, millions of pounds of taxpayers' money there. All of these people around the round table, all of them being paid because we're disabled. You know, they're employed because of our disabilities. And so 1.5 years later, we're still fighting with them. And it got to a head there last week, where when the woman chairing the meeting, where you all have to, you know, take notes, you have to use your time, you know. And I thought, you know what, this is not happening anymore. I've had it. And I kind of wasn't well. I had a tummy bug. So I lost the plot altogether. And I just said, she threw her eyes up to heaven because it was on the agenda again. And I thought, you know what? You're not getting away with it. And because it was recorded and they were all sitting in the council meeting, you know, and I just didn't care. What are they going to do to me, you know? And this, to me, it's a principle, because what they're spouting out, you know, we have 2 disabled people on our board, you know, that. So I said, every one of you are making money from our disabilities. How dare you then humiliate us, you know, for asking to have a small, that wouldn't even buy a burger, just to, you know, to cover our, you know, that our time is valuable. And honestly, I did think I might have went a bit far in, you know, but they went, and I wasn't sure, you know, because I got quite sick afterwards, you know, and I wasn't sure if I'd gone really too far, because I'm not a rude person, and I don't think it gets you anywhere, or screaming or shouting or being rude, you know, facts work. But I was assured that I made a very clear point, and what they want us to do is to give it up. So they can say, well, we tried to bring disabled people in, and sure, look, they weren't interested. This is a tactic that I've recognized in the HSE, within others, you know, other groups of where they're inclusion of disabled people, but they really don't want them at the table. They don't want us, you know?
Especially when they're getting paid a lot of money to do there. And then that's the other thing is, you know, people think because you got a disability that you're sitting on your arse at home doing nothing, and that your time, well, you're going to be doing nothing anyway, so you might as well help us
That's
out
it.
here. And then and that's like I find difficult trying to get a job, because no one's going to pay you a decent wage, you know, and make allowances for your disability when you do have off days and things like that. So, you know, most of us end up on long-term disability for the rest of our lives.
Yeah,
And
into
like, we want
poverty,
to be,
into, you know.
we don't want to be like, we want to be contributing members of society and things like that. We don't want to be stuck at home and all the time, you know. And
But
yeah,
as a principal, I will not do it for nothing.
exactly.
You're not doing it for nothing. So I think I sufficiently embarrassed them enough, you know, but really, you know, I said I no longer want to speak to unless I'm speaking to the person that can actually make the decision. So I'm not interested anymore because they take advantage.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to value our own worth.
Absolutely.
Out. You know, otherwise, if we do not see the value in ourselves, others are not
Yeah.
going to. I think it's also about respect. You know, I've been to Leinster House many times, and I've been there about people with disabilities, in fact, who the many people every day we hear of those who are killed on our roads. We don't hear the statistics of those who are injured, who have life-changing.
Mm-hmm.
32 people killed since the 1st of January, which is absolutely shocking. And many of them are young people who had their full. And those who are injured end up in Dunleary. And they end up, first of all, awaiting a bed in Dunleary. There's only one rehabilitation hospital in the country, and the wait is excessive. And the time means that those who are waiting, just like for the necessary spinal surgeries for children, that they deteriorate, and that deterioration is for life. You know, they will not have that functionality back. So I think when we speak, and we are living, as I said, independently at the moment, we are luckier than most, and there is an obligation or an onus on us to speak to government. And I went at the time, Shane Ross was the Minister for Transport, and I spoke about not just the impact on me or the family, immediate family or extended family, but on the community, because everybody, as Gladys says, they view us differently too. And oftentimes it's a sense of pity or shame of seeing us as lesser beings, and they don't, you know, they can't handle that. And that's not their fault either. In many ways, it's the way that people with disabilities have been seen for decades in Irish society. So we are not the role models that government want to include in the discussions or in the NGOs or whoever they appoint. If they don't want us there, and if they do not value us being there, then we should not participate, because it's tokenistic and it is doing a disservice to every person with a disability in the country.
100%. Yeah, totally.
What I'm hearing, ladies, and loud and clear, and if I'm hearing it, surely the politicians, the people who are paid to advocate for people living with disabilities, is in fact the invisibility of the people living with disabilities, and the fact that their voices are not being heard.
Yeah. Also, another thing that's annoying me with this upcoming referendum is
let's
they
talk about
keep bringing in disabilities into it. And I'm like, the changes in the Constitution have nothing got to do with people with disabilities. It's all about mothers and women's roles in the home being acknowledged in their Constitution. Yeah, I know, like, certain words are a bit archaic, but like one of the girls from the Countess actually did she actually speaks fluent Irish, and she was saying that the word Chialach in Oscailge means family in English, and it was misinterpreted into the English language, because our constitution was written in, and she said the word, I might be mispronouncing the word wrong, Julak or something. It's the word for responsibility, but they put it in as duties, and it's like, this has nothing got to do with people with disabilities at all. And they're trying to bribe people for a yes vote by, oh, we will make sure that we will look after people with disabilities if you get a yes vote. And I'm like, well, you could do it now. You could do it now. Like, why are you waiting? You could easily do it now. So stop trying to gaslight us, Roderick. I'm so sick of it. It's just like, I would normally be swearing a lot, but I'm not going to do it because we're recording live. But like, it's infuriating, and I'm sure there's lots of people out there who are feeling exactly the same as I am with this whole referendum. It's all gaslighting. They don't give a crap, to be honest.
But the woman today that is a doctor, not of medicine, but a doctor of academia, who has a muscular degenerative disorder, was really articulate in what, now I don't know what her personal circumstances are, and it doesn't really matter, I don't need to know, but what she was talking about, but that care in the family, a lot of people do not want their family caring for them. Do you know, it is not always the right fit, sort of thing. And also it changes the dynamic within a family, so the idea that somebody has to, is it, the one that's always the kind one, or the softer one, or the more sensitive one is left. I know this from my own experience as an only girl in a family, that when my parents got older, and my father, my brothers got all, aren't they great lads? And I got all of the work. Now don't get me wrong, I loved my dad, and I did it with love to care for him. But my brothers got all the praise. They did nothing. They did absolutely
My mother had the
nothing.
same thing when she was looking after her
as an only girl. But most families, not a lot of families, don't work. The family home might not be the safest place for somebody to be. And what is wrong with, why are they doing this? Pitting a family member against a person with a disability, and as you said, that what happens is, does a sibling get to mind their disabled brother or sibling? It seems the stress of that, and the sort of sense of and the guilt that would go with that. So if you're, I remember when I was young, I wanted to go out and play what my brothers were doing, but it was a very sexist life. I had to go to the shops, and I had to help with my younger baby brother, and as the girl, right? So this idea, sort of thing of pitting within the family, that sometimes, and what happens then to somebody who doesn't have a family, or so what this woman was saying, and I absolutely agree with her, it's institutionalization. Now we have a huge history in we actually imprisoned, as I would call it, institutionalized more people than they did in Russia. I mean, we really liked it, locking people up, and really quite happily locking women up, particularly, for the Magdalens, sort of the mental institutions, all of this kind of carry on. So we are going to be in my view, coming back to your family either looks after you, or you go into an institution, a nursing home, not in that package that you could have supports within your own surroundings of your choosing, and paid for the proper job that somebody is doing in giving that supports, recognizing it as a proper, caring, decent job to have if you're psychologically suited to it. And some people aren't. And because it's very low paid. And to get rid of the charity model, I'm doing you a favor. You're lucky. Do you know what I mean? Don't forget here now to sit there all day, and I might arrive at 5. And I think what is so sad with the women that I've met, that are being put to bed at 5 o'clock, like a child, being put to bed because that's the carers, you know, they don't work after whatever, 6 or you name it, but you have to be put to bed as an adult, to be put to bed at 5 o'clock, to be left there until somebody decides to, you know, it's absolutely horrendous. And as Rita said and Sabina said, we're living independently. We're the lucky ones. But I know women that are being put to bed at 5. They don't want it. They don't, you know, they are, and they feel it. You can sense it off them that I'm a burden to my, you know, no longer that mother that was in the home, no longer. And I think I said this to you, Roisin, that it was very evident to me, you know, in an observation that when I was in I called it an adult creche, but it was an adult day service for disabilities, that the men came in that had wives, came in clean and nice jumpers on them with no holes in it or any of that, you know, pressed trousers and not smelling a wee. The women came in with all sorts of kind of anything was thrown at them. The hair probably not brushed even, you know, and it was really very noticeable, the difference between, you know, so women do most of the caring, and most of the things that they notice are the small things of wanting to look nice. Just because you have a disability doesn't mean that you don't want your hair done or have a nice blouse, if you know, a bit of makeup or whatever, if that's what you want. But it was very noticeable to me, and on my hobby horse now, that the men come all in clean and the hair brushed by the spouse, you know, mostly, and collected, and they never were on the magic bus. They were driven in privately because they wouldn't have liked to be on the disabled bus, you know. So there's a difference, complete difference in the way men are, you know, looked after with a disability versus women, I think, you know. So I don't know.
That would really seriously affect somebody's self-esteem, their sense of value in their community or in their lives, and also the mental health issue of living with a disability as well.
Yeah.
I used to work as a carer on work experience when I was doing that course with in Shakur. That time we had to do some work in the community, and I worked in a nursing home. It happened to be the same nursing home my grandmother was in, but I wasn't in the same section because you're not allowed to treat your own family for obvious reasons. But they gave me the opportunity to work there, and what I found was they were very short staffed, especially with care assistants. They only had 2 nurses on, and there was lots of patients that needed full-time assisting all the time, and like half the time they'd be ringing for assistance, and like we'd be busy with another patient, so it's very short-staffed, very underpaid. Like I wasn't even getting paid to do it because it was part of my work experience, so like I was technically free labor for them. But it is a tough job. Like, and don't get me wrong, I enjoyed working with the elder because it was mainly elderly people that I was working with. I actually worked for Age Action as well. After that, I actually enjoy working with the elderly. Some of the stories that they have are just amazing, and things like that. But also I found that, you know, they were like also put to bed like, you know, early-ish, like 8 o'clock and that, you know. Now there are some that were able to walk around, and they actually sat in their armchair watching the television in the evening time if they had their own room and that. But like a lot of the patients that needed, you know, 2 people to lift them into a hoist and things like that, most of them will be in bed by probably about 7:30, 8 o'clock, or just before shift change, you know. And like I was just like, well, what happens if they didn't want to go to bed? But they're like, then the night staff come on, but they're short staffed as well. Like, you know, it's a staffing issue, the reason why they're doing this. And it's also the the care assistants would be lucky to get minimum wage sometimes, and then they have to like organize their own lunches and things like that. Now some facilities, like the facility that I did my work experience in, they actually gave us lunch and stuff like that. But if you're like working as a nurse in a hospital, or a care assistant in a hospital, you have to buy your own lunch and bring in your own lunch, and then you have to like try and organize childcare and things like that, you know. So it's like it's very undervalued work, like, and what the work that they do, I totally admire them, you know, anyone that works as a nurse or a care assistant, or even the guys, like when I was in hospital there who were pushing people down to x-ray and stuff. They were so nice and courteous, but they never really get a look in, you know. And I don't know what their wages are like, because I've never done that job, but like, you know, like there's people are being undervalued even in the work in that the services that are there already. And the short staffness is a huge issue, I think, when it comes to care, especially with people who are living in institutions or nursing homes or various different places like that.
You hit on something there, Sabina, that I'd forgotten about, which is really, how could you forget about the level of poverty that hits disability? And I'm just thinking, and I can see her face in front of me, and obviously I wouldn't mention her name or whatever, but she had been a mother to 5, and had a severe cerebral hemorrhage, a stroke that left her in a really, really bad state. But to get her hair cut, to get her enough money for a packet of cigarettes, the only thing that she enjoyed or whatever was, she told me how she would have to negotiate, because she had no money of her own, negotiate with her husband. You know, she'd have to pick the right moment to ask him for the money to get her hair cut. And in the day centre that I was in, there was a beautiful lady, an absolute beautiful lady, who did come in, and mostly, if you like, the horrible word, charity, but she cut people's hair for a fiver, and you know, whatever. And I thought that was the key. That was really that kept me there. It's getting my hair cut for a fiver. But that this woman, the poverty, it hit her. You know, she had her own money, and then suddenly she was reduced to asking her partner for, and so depending on his humor, she might get enough money to get her hair cut, like the fiver, the tenner, or he would dish out X amount of cigarettes. It was horrendous, you know, absolutely horrendous. And I used to say to myself, thank God I have my own, from my work, my own pension, sort of thing. Like, I mean, that I had that reliant to, because the poverty is huge within disability. And within women, unfortunately, more so, because the chances are they stayed at home if they reared a family. You know, they had a cut in their working lives, rearing their families and going back to work. And then there was a gap then, that a lot of the women that I came across didn't have the full pension. They had, non-contributory pension that would kept them in poverty, basically. Just the bare. And the beautiful woman that I was very friendly with, she's passed away now, and very friendly. And makes me cry, actually, to get a bit of a cardigan out of pennies. I mean, this clothes are as cheap as chips, but she'd have to save to get a cardigan.
Yeah.
And that's also hidden and never spoken about, the poverty side of disability.
Yeah.
Well, there is a
And
cost
sorry.
That's never truly factored in. For instance, for many of us, and particularly with lower limbs, you feel the cold far more than other people. And I am cold, so I would have heating on much maybe other family members would have, or other people would have. And I think that hidden cost is not acknowledged, particularly by policymakers, and if you try and bring it up, again, the problem is within you, the person with the disability, rather than within the policymakers who have ample opportunities to include you in the discussions to ensure. And I know, the Disability Federation of Ireland, and they have various groups and access for all that they speak to. But one of the things that gets me, both on mother and baby homes and Magdalene laundries and residential schools, and here in the area of disability that we've seen in more recent times, is the fragmentation that is promoted more so by the government in a way, so that you get various people who are caring for people who are significantly disabled, and who believe the government will actually provide, by a yes vote, will provide an opportunity for legislation or enacting legislation that will benefit them or their loved one. Now, if the government haven't done that for the last bloody 30 years of my life, and particularly for the last 11 years or so that Fianna Gael and Fianna Fáil have been in power, they have zero doing it. I do not trust the government. Unfortunately, I have been let down far too many times, but I see that they pit one group against another. And I find that deeply, deeply troubling, because we should all sing for one another, and we should sing more particularly for those who don't have a voice and those who are within institutions where they are really silenced, where they are invisible, and where anything can be happening to them. And we've seen Oris Tracta, we have seen on prime time where people with disabilities, and we've seen elder abuse, we've seen financial abuse, we can happen in families as well. But we need to ensure that protections are in place, and we need to speak for them first. And we need to challenge a government minister who promotes one group or promotes one view, vote yes above another, without any pre-legislative scrutiny, without any chance for debate. That is seriously damaging, and that's not how democracy should work.
But if you saw
I've said that if they get into government, that they will be, and if it's a non-satisfactory yes vote and it's a no vote, they're going to when they go into government, they seem very self-assured that they're going into government, that they are going to repeat the referendum until they get the vote that they want. Sorry, Gladys.
No, I just wanted to say that an area that I'm involved with as well, in relation to abuse and stuff like that, and it's called The Last Taboo, and I'm absolutely shocked that the idea, and it was so little about it. I remember that I was sitting in the car listening to it. Was Katie Hannon was doing Liveline, where an abuser was raping elderly women with Alzheimer's and you name it. But now the HSE, I think, have stopped, think about over 70 places that this guy worked in, and you name it. And so the last taboo is within the acknowledgement of sexual abuse against elderly. We know financial abuse, but this is an area that nobody wants to talk about at all. And they shut that down. We should have been out on the streets. These, disability and the most vulnerable, and trust is such a huge. You have somebody coming in to your room, to your home, to support you in a shower, and there has to be a huge trust happening there, to trust another human being.
Yeah.
But this guy with impunity, I'd say he's not the only one. I'd say that was only the fact that he hit on a woman who had capacity and had the DNA. That guy was still going to be continuing, the last taboo of the rape of elderly women and men. This is not confined and it is uncomfortable, desperately uncomfortable to discuss it, to bring it up. When I bring it up, people say, "Oh God, Gladys, have you no jokes? Have you anything nice to say? Happy stories?" Because people don't want to look at this. But if we don't look at this could be any one of us in a vulnerable position, in any vulnerability, whether it be in hospital, nursing home, institution in your own home. And if we don't bring it about and, you know, bring it to the attention of the policymakers, to the, you know, and safeguarding for people with disabilities and the elderly, and especially elderly without capacity, you know, and that's my next, you know, thing to be focusing on when I get the other thing up and running, is, you know, and I know it's uncomfortable and it isn't a pleasant subject, but none of it is, and that's why it's allowed to happen, because none of us want to talk about it, you know.
Yeah, it's a difficult subject. Just one last question for me, and I'll throw that out to the panel there. There is some discussions around around disability allowance. How's that paid? There is now, these are discussion documents. There's nothing finalized or anything like that. And if I am correct, now I am open to correction as also, that as part of the disability payment, that your payment would be tiered level in line with your disability. So they're basically saying someone will make a decision, you know, you're falling into this category, so your payment is going to be this, or your payment is going to be whatever. I know disability groups have come out against that, saying it's, you know, it's a it would be a very retrograde step. You know, it's coming back to the whole medical model. It's not a social model around disability. I wonder, do you have any of our panel have any thoughts on that?
I think, you know, at the moment, the disability payments are not that great anyway. So if they started lowering that for other people with disability, you're going to have a lot of people living in really bad poverty and not being able to pay their bills. You know, like it's something like it's a 220 euros or something for disability allowance. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it's only around 200 euros, and like it's not a lot of money. It's not like we're rolling in dough, and they automatically assume that we're like, this is a Leo Varadkar thing. He did this in the past when he was Minister for Social Protection, like, you know, trying to get out the welfare frauds. And someone was reported, actually, there was a story which actually made me laugh. Someone was reported for welfare fraud. It turns out that she wasn't actually getting the correct payment, so the government actually owed her money. But it was just like, what, like this is all well and good. They're giving themselves a raise, you know, like a stupid amount of raise. Plus they get their expenses paid for, you know, and their petrol paid for, depending on how far they have to travel into the Dáil for meetings and stuff. It's absolutely outrageous. And now they want to cut disability. Cut your own wages, for God's sake. You get paid enough, you know, and this is just preposterous, you know. I'm just like, I've had enough with this government just trying to keep us down and knocking us down. Like when I first got on illness benefit, when I had my accident, I was getting paid 220 a week, and then it went down to 188 like the following year, and it only creeped up by a fiver, and it's only just gone up to where it roughly is now. And I'm just like, and then they're like giving themselves pat on the back during budget times, going, oh yes, we're so great, look, we're giving you an extra 10 quid. Like, wow. Like, talk about my electricity bill, like I'm paying 100 euros into my meter every 2 weeks. Like, you know, it's like, you know, there's no benefits. It's like, and they're trying to do this whole kind of scheme of, like, no one knows how my disability is. Like, there could be, I can have good days and I'm able to go out swimming. There could be days where I can't even get out of bed. Even walking to the bathroom is agonizing. And you know, they don't even put that into account. They just look at you, go, you're grand, you can walk on both legs. Like, you know, it's just like, it's just trying to put us down even further and take away like our independence even further, you know. It's
but
like,
there's no living. It's existing. It isn't
yeah,
a living. It isn't an amount of money to live on. But what makes me laugh, well, doesn't make me laugh, makes me mostly cry, that the idea of somebody living on a disability benefit, and then I just read yesterday that a solicitor who happened to manage to, you know, borrow 80 million or whatever, some uncrazy amount of money that he swindled, getting mortgages from everybody that wanted to give them. And then, poor Divil, he had a very, very, very hard time when he skipped off to Brazil, and he was in Brazilian jail, and they were very not nice to him. They didn't give him cream cakes or anything like it. So he scoopered back to Ireland where he'd be treated nicely, and he got 5 years for robbing millions and millions, and not a penny paid back the taxpayer. But then you would have Leo with his big sign for the fraudsters, like us, that are ripping off the state. We don't get up at 6 a.m. to go to work. So this perception out there is that we're gaming the system. You're pretending you're not really disabled. You're just it's whatever. So the money is poverty. It is bare existence. And then when you turn to pension age, you just go on to a pension, and you're just not disabled anymore. You're just old. So you go to the old age pension, and that's it. So just can't live in it.
I have with it is that they are going for a one size fits all. So basically, you have an internal committee who makes a decision and draws up a particular document that is the tick boxes for you. So it's based on your functionality and their perception of how your body should function, without any indication of the daily struggles that many people with disabilities, even with the same diagnosis or the same illness, have. There are differences right throughout, but interdepartmental committees generally have the state exchequer there that is keeping the payments down, basically looking from the taxpayer's viewpoint. Now, all of us are taxpayers still.
It's true.
They are looking from a perception that we are part of the problem, and that the problem lies in us as people with disabilities. And so it's the model that's adopted in the UK, and this is in Ireland. It's filtering in here. And because you have politicians like Leo Varadkar, who has come out before and attempted to blame those who don't get up early in the morning, without regarding all of those who care for their loved ones right throughout the night and are up at maybe 5 o'clock with or an elderly person with a disability, and to get very limited sleep, if any. And then he had to apologise for that. And I think many times the government, like Roderick O'Gorman has done similarly before, they put their foot in it, and then they apology. And that apology is only half-hearted, because what they meant in the first instance still stands, is still their perception. So yeah, having a tick box in front of me or a form and looking at me from a functional point of view and saying, yes, I believe you can work 2 or 3 days a week, and so we will deduct any payment to you for those days. It's not progressive. It is in the interests of people with disabilities, and everyone, including DFI, any group that speaks for people with disabilities, has to take on board that we are not one size fits all, and nothing about us without us. We should all be involved in the discussion that looks at us from a functionality point of view,
But I suppose it's important to stress that it's a discussion, and this has kind of been one of the big ticket things that have come out of that discussion. So, I think it's important that activists like yourself, that you're very vocal on this, and that this type of system does not come in at all.
Yeah.
And we need, we're running out of time, but the one thing is we need to keep this conversation going, ladies. And I would love for you to be continuously coming back. If there's any topics, issues at all, please let us use the Irish Political Roundup and Confident Women Ireland YouTube platforms to get that message out there and be the voice for people living with disabilities, because there's no one talking about this in mainstream media. And maybe if we get more and more people on other YouTube platforms talking about this than the mainstream media, and then politicians might start taking notice of their voters and the citizens of Ireland. And it's really shocking for me, because there is no, and I'm sure you'll agree, there's Sinn Féin and all the other small political parties, apart from Aontú, where Padal Tobin is very, very vocal in the Dáil. Catherine Connolly from Galway is very, very vocal. Senator Ger Cockrell is very vocal, you know, and then the senators, help me out here, Tom Conlon and Michael McDougall. Am I missing someone else from the senators? And
Mullen, is it, what's his name? Mullen?
Mullins and
Keoghan.
Keogh. You know, there is no opposition in governments. You know, politicians are just tick boxing, and you know, it's and how they're all coming out and advocating the yes vote for this. It's, you know, they're not listening to the people.
And
I
the
think
women
also
for
that-
election were spouting off nonsense the other day as well, like in one of their videos, and it was all yes people. Where's the politicians, the women politicians that are against?
But they seem to be the worst,
this?
though, Sabina. They seem to be the most, you know, it's like I think disability organisations, and I probably get shot down for saying this, because of this competing factor, you know, and pitting one against the other. You will not get other supporting one another. Why are women not supporting, you know, other women? You know, they don't want, you know, they will do, they don't get in when they get into politics and say, you know, like, I'm going to get in there on a ticket of, you know, I'm a woman, I'm doing great. But they don't want to support disabled women or ordinary women, any women. You know, it seems they forget once they get in there. And to be quite frank, and I hate to say it about my own sex, sometimes they're actually worse, you know, in their dealing and in their harshness and lack of understanding. And I've come across a couple of them that I would say is cold as ice, you know, literally as cold as ice. You know, I don't know. I wouldn't name them in case. Can you get sued for calling somebody as cold as ice?
Well, there was Maggie Thatcher. That's an example of one, you know, just saying.
Yeah.
She's dead now, so she can't really sue us.
Yeah.
But you know what, ladies? I've always said, as you probably also on my Twitter, I've always said women do not support women. And the hashtag women support women is sometimes nothing more than word salad. And that's something that, you know, I'm determined is to gather and network and bring forth women who are really, really do mean the words women supporting women. And that's something we're going to do here on Irish Political Roundup and the Confident Women Ireland YouTube channel. It's about, you know what, we're going to look actively looking for that. And I do hope maybe the three of us can all meet up in person someday.
That'd be lovely.
You know, and you can swap on your Twitter feeds and everything else, contact one another. I think it'd be amazing, ladies, you know, that there's more voices out there, especially coming together without, as you said, Rita and Gladys and Sabina, it's very fractured, and it's a deliberate strategy from the legislators and the power brokers and politicians to cause division within all certain groups, because that is when they win and they get everybody working for them instead of working for the people. So we need to come together united and helping.
And they're not that pushed, Catherine, as well, or Roisin, about articulate women. They don't like articulate women.
We're troublesome.
They don't like it at all, you know, sort of thing. Like, I mean, so the pat on the head and does she take sugar doesn't really work with us. And so they're not particularly happy you know,
It's
sort
the
of saying
rise
one
of the
thing.
divine feminine now, ladies, and we're all coming together. So, look, but we're going to take this conversation further. So, hope we see you all together again, and maybe we'll meet in person someday. I really love that. You know I've met Sabina and Gladys, and I've been in conversations with Breda Murphy on Twitter for years. So, I'm delighted to meet you virtually. And I know I speak for Paul and myself. Thank you so much from our hearts for coming on tonight and taking the time. And again, it was something that I'm conscious that we're in February, you know, the heating, people living with disabilities, the cost of living with electricity, as you said, Breda, being cold. There's no one talking about that. So there's so many conversations that we have to take forward going forth from now on. And so thank you so much indeed. We really do appreciate it.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so
Okay.
much indeed.
Cheers. Bye. It was lovely meeting
Bye.
everybody.